Walking in sunlight all
For us to begin with our Wednesday night Bible classes. Thankful that you're here. Looking forward to our time together tonight, studying God's Word as we are continuing our Voice of the Heart series. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Before we get started with our Bible class, our good brother Trey is going to come and lead us in a song. So let's stand as Trey comes and leads us in this song, and then we'll have our Bible class. Thank you, Trey, for leading that song and for that special dedication to Talmadge. I know that'll mean a lot to him when he gets to see that online. Thankful that you're here. I appreciate all of our song leaders, those that lead on Sunday mornings, those that lead Sunday nights, and Trey, who leads for us on Wednesday night. And I'm always encouraged. I think that's why the Lord gifted us singing, is for our education and for our encouragement. And singing is a beautiful and wonderful thing that He gave us. And if you want a little extra encouragement, let me invite you to join us on Wednesday nights at 6:10. In here, on Wednesday nights at 6:10, our young men who are participating in year-round song leading for Lads to Leaders are leading songs in here. So if you want a little extra encouragement, a little more singing in your life, come here then. Also, our young ladies are in the upper room at the same time. So any of our ladies who want to go in there, ladies are welcome to stay in here, or you can go in there where all the ladies, or where the young ladies are leading. But at 6:10 Wednesday nights, our young men and young ladies are leading singing, and that's always it's a really beautiful thing, a really encouraging thing. And as much as I appreciate our current song leaders, I am hopeful. And looking forward to the future of our next crop of song leaders that are in training. And you never know who the next great song leader is going to be. And you might just be able to say, I was in the pews on Wednesday nights when they were just learning how to lead singing. So come join us at 6:10 on Wednesday nights as our young people are leading us in our singing. We're continuing in our series called The Voice of the Heart. Voice of the Heart, and this is based off of a book by Dr. Chip Dodd. And Voice of the Heart, the tagline of the book is a call to full living. And the idea that Dr. Chip Dodd has when he wrote this book is your heart speaks to you. And until you know how to learn the language and are able to understand your heart that speaks to you, you will not be able to have a full life. And the language that your heart uses to speak to you are your emotions. So we've been taking the last few weeks, and we're going to take the next several weeks of looking at emotions that God has given us. And a big theme of the book is all of these emotions, hurt, lonely, sad, anger, fear, shame, guilt, and glad. These 8 core emotions, all of them are gifts from God, even though a lot of times when we first read these, they seem maybe negative at first. All emotions. God has given us as a gift, and when we learn to use these, they are a huge blessing on our life. I've been meaning to say this like the last several weeks, but I always forget. Thank you for being here and for participating in this class. This is a very different kind of class, especially for me as a teacher. I have never been more uncomfortable in any series that I've done in, almost 15 years of teaching Bible class. I've never been more uncomfortable than this series. It takes me probably 3 times as long to develop one of these lessons as it does any other lesson, and 3 times as long, and I feel like half as good. But regardless, thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging in the conversation that comes with this type of Bible class that is maybe more topical and a little more psychological with a lot of the things that we do. Tonight we're looking at the emotion of sadness, the emotion of sadness. And yes, just like every emotion we've looked at, this is a gift from God. God has gifted us sadness. So our first sort of opening discussion question here, this is kind of be rapid fire. What are typical things humans feel sad over? Share some things. What are some typical things humans feel sad over? Death. Yes, death. That's probably the number one thing that comes to our mind is death and feeling sadness and grief because of that loss. What else? Sickness. Yeah. Feeling sadness because of a lack of health for yourself or a loved one. What else? Failed relationships. Disappointments. Anything else? That's good stuff. Yeah, losing your job, missing out on a job that you wanted, lost opportunities are things that we often feel sad about. Unrealized dreams, maybe life stages of the past. How many times have you looked at a picture of your family when your family was younger and maybe you thought, man, I wish I could hold my baby one more time. It'd be weird if you held your 35-year-old, but when you look at a picture, you think about your baby as your baby, and I wish I could go back to that life stage. And maybe, even though it's a good thing for where your child is now and your relationship with your child might be wonderful, but you look to the past and you say, I'm sort of sad for that life stage being over. We are saddened over a loss of a stage of life maybe that we've been going through. Any others? Yeah, prayers not answered. Ultimately, we feel sad. Sadness is directly tied to loss, whether that be a lost loved one, someone that's died, a broken relationship, a loss of relationship, an unrealized dream. You feel like you have lost out on a dream or a prayer request, maybe. All of sadness is centered around the idea of lost or lostness. To illustrate this, we're going to start out looking at 2 Bible verses, and then we'll get into what the book Voice of the Heart has to say. Our first Bible verse, as we think about sadness, and this was tied into mourning, Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 2 and 3. We go to the book of Ecclesiastes to get all of the moodiness, which is filled in the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 2 and 3 says, "It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad." All right, let me pose the question to you, and I believe there's a variety of answers we can give here. Why is the house of mourning better than the house of feasting? Why is the house of mourning better than the house of feasting? All right, let me get this one first. Expectations brings you closer to God. That's a good one. What exactly do you mean by expectations? Yeah, mourning. Yeah, good. What? Mission accomplished. So I agree with those things, that it's better to go to the house of mourning in one sense because if you know a brother, a sister, a loved one is in their reward in heaven. Why else maybe is it better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting? Because in a sense, that is the house of feasting. Because the house of feasting is celebration. And in those scenarios, you are celebrating that your loved one is at their reward. And I think what Ecclesiastes is getting to is not just the celebrating the fact that someone's in heaven, but something deeper when it comes to mourning and the actual sadness that we feel. Why else maybe is it better to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting? What was that? Okay, that's great. Console someone else. It's an opportunity to be supportive of someone else. That's great. You know, and in a house of mourning, there's a big need of that. Who needs consoling? Who needs help at the house of celebration or the house of feasting? Well, everybody's there just to have a good time. But the house of mourning, there are people who need help. So that's a good thought. I hadn't thought about it from that angle. One thing I wrote down, those who love have been blessed by love. When you go to the house of mourning, it is a sign that you are someone who has been in deep relationship. You are someone who has been deeply connected to other people. You have experienced a loving relationship. So when you go to the house of mourning, you are honoring someone that you love. It is a sign that you have been in a relationship with people on this earth. So it's better to go to the house of mourning because of the honor that comes with mourning. You honor yourself because of the relationships you had. You honor the family or the one who has died. Any other thoughts why it's better to go to the house of mourning than feasting? What about the second point? Sorrow is better than laughter. Why is it that sorrow is better than laughter? It's a tougher one, probably. In some sense, we just want to be like, it's in the Bible, so we agree with it. We might not fully understand it, but it's in the Bible, so it's true. But I think it's good for us to engage in really sitting down and thinking about these things of why is it that sorrow is better than laughter. And one thing that I wrote down is we learn in sorrow. In sorrow, we really learn. In joyous times and in laughter, maybe there are some lessons that we learn, but I would argue they're not as deep and meaningful as the lessons that we learn when we are in sorrow. And when you are able to, especially if you're able to navigate the waters of mourning, loss, and sorrow, when you're able to navigate those in a successful way, when you come out on the other side, how much have you been blessed by what you've been through? Painful, yes. Difficult, yes. Are you still going to mourn for the one that is gone? Of course you are. But there is a new wisdom and a new understanding about this life that you didn't have before. So there is an incredible amount of learning and wisdom to be gained when it comes to sorrow as opposed to something like laughter. Any other thoughts? Yeah, that's great. It's more humbling. Anytime we go through loss, it reminds us that we're human, reminds us that we are not perfect, that we are not immune, and maybe one of the greatest lessons it reminds us of one day, I will be where this person is. One day I will be on this other side of eternity. So oftentimes the house of mourning reminds us that. When we go through sorrow, it reminds us that. And it really helps to shake us awake of how it is that we should be living. What kind of legacy are we leaving behind, and what sort of place are we heading to? Were you saying something over here? Yeah, purifying. Yeah, there is something about any trial in life, but especially the immense trial of sorrow and loss. It is a refining fire. Difficult, but brings you to something. And I'm sorry, I have the wrong passage up here. This is Psalm chapter 126, verses 5 and 6. That Ecclesiastes 7 is the previous passage. No, that's right. The next one we're going to is Psalm 126. I'm sorry about that. This is Ecclesiastes 7, 2 and 3. The next one is Psalm 126, 5 and 6, but I forgot to change it here on the screen. But this is Psalm 126, verses 5 and 6. We'll go through this one a little quicker. This verse, honestly, is what you might call a proof text. It's a text that's pulled out of another context, but it has a truth for us. It still has something we can learn about here. Psalm 126, verses 5 and 6 says, "Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. He who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him." What maybe do we learn from this passage? Let me read it one more time. Think about what is it we are learning from this passage. Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. He who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. What's something we can learn from this passage? Work hard and what? All right, there is a work hard and reward, all right? So anytime we talk about sowing and reaping, there's this idea of working toward a reward. And in this verse, it is saying the work hard portion is tears, is navigating mourning, and the reward is joy, okay? And I think what God is showing us through these passages is the thing that we've been discussing, that all these emotions are a gift, including sadness, including when we are so sad, going through some sort of loss that is so immense that our tears abound, that while that is difficult, much like sowing, there is a harvest to that. And part of the mourning process of shedding tears, of navigating through these difficult emotions is a joy that is on the other side. So when we go through these trials, there is something on the other side of them. And that is not, let me think of how to phrase this, that is not the cause of the loss that we experience, okay? I don't believe necessarily that when loss happens to us, it is because God is directly trying to shape and mold us. But when loss happens to us, God can shape and mold us, okay? Do you understand the difference? Loss doesn't happen because God is wanting you to experience loss, and that this loss can, that He calls that loss for you. But in the midst of that loss, God can shape and transform and bring about joy when this is navigated. All right, let's get into some of what the book says, Voice of the Heart. Chip Dodd, he describes sadness as, sadness is the feeling that speaks to how much you value what is missed, what is gone, and what is lost. It also speaks of how deeply you value what you love and what you have and what you live. So this is sort of what we've seen reflected in Scripture already, that the house of mourning reminds us of the value of the relationship of the one who's been lost. Also, the house of mourning should remind us of the value of the relationships that we still have on this earth. Sadness reminds us of both of those things. Hopefully it helps us to value what is gone, but also to value what we still have on this earth. Sadness is an emotion that we all understand, and we've talked about hurt and loneliness, and those are, of course, emotions that we all feel and go through. But sadness, I think, for all of us is something that's more easily identifiable. It's more obvious when we're going through it, and maybe even the solutions, maybe solutions isn't the right word, but maybe the solutions for it are things that are more obvious to us as well. But the truth is that a lot of times we don't want to feel sadness. Even when we should feel sadness, a lot of times we don't want to feel sadness. A lot of times we view others who feel sadness, we view them as weak, or we view them as maybe self-pitying. And there is a difference between self-pity and sadness. We'll get to that maybe. But we try to be tough and not feel sad because of the stigma maybe that comes with sadness, or honestly, sadness can sometimes be exhausting. But sadness is a gift because it shows us how much we value what we love and have. So most of the stuff we're talking about, I know through this conversation, most of the stuff we're talking about are relationships, are people. But sadness, as we alluded to with our first question, Sadness comes in all shapes and sizes, in all situations. And so it's not always with people and relationships. Sometimes we're sad because of things tied to our work, or maybe we're sad even because of a possession or lost opportunity, these sorts of things. All right, here is a big point here. I really liked what Dr. Dodd wrote in his book here. Sadness is for wealthy-hearted people. Sadness is for wealthy-hearted people. Your sadness that you experience in your life is a sign of the wealth that is in your life. It's a sign of the wonderful relationships and opportunities that you've had in your life. Sadness is for wealthy-hearted people. Psychologically, everybody has probably heard of the hormone oxytocin, and that is a hormone that's produced that is directly tied to love and affection and relationship. And oxytocin is released in all sort of situations in your life. If you are holding hands with a loved one, the fuzzy good feeling that you have, that is the release of oxytocin. Oxytocin also helps in moments of pain. Mothers, when they are going through childbirth, an immense amount of oxytocin is released during childbirth. Mothers, when they are nursing their babies, and immense amounts of oxytocin is released as they're nursing their babies. Oxytocin is this hormone that often forms relationships. I've heard a person talk about how oxytocin is the hormone that is sort of the cement that holds relationships, one of the cement that establishes holding relationships together. It is, of course, present in sexual relationships as well. In fact, people call oxytocin the cuddle hormone. That's the hormone that is released in moments of cuddling with a loved one. So it's a neural cement that holds us together and those that we love. Helps with pain. Mothers they figured out that when mothers are in childbirth, more oxytocin is released when the spouse is there holding the one who is in labor's hand. It actually helps with pain, just having a loved one present. So why bring this up? Why bring oxytocin up? Because oxytocin is what is lost when you experience a loss in relationship. And when you are going through sorrow, you are experiencing a loss of this hormone that you are dependent on as well. So when we lose relationships, oftentimes we think about, yes, it affects us on an emotional level, but it affects us even deeper than that. It affects us on a biological, cellular level as well. That's how traumatic and dramatic a loss or a severing of relationship can be. And your body is trying to, as much as your mind is trying to process loss, your body is trying to process loss as well. And sometimes your body can even be in rebellion of you, be in rebellion and act in ways that you do not anticipate because of the loss that you have. So this is essentially what grief is. When you experience a loss, it is your mind and your body trying to navigate the waters of loss. And sadness is the feeling we agree to when we bond relationally. The moment you choose to be in relationship with someone else, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, brother, sister, friend, coworker, the moment you decide to have relationships in this world with other people, you are agreeing to sadness, because at some point there will be a severing of that relationship. So sadness is a feeling we agree to when we bond relationally. All right, let's get into sadness a little bit. Sadness is an honoring feeling. Sadness is an honoring feeling. When I am sad, it speaks to, this is what we've sort of talked about with the house of mourning. When I am sad, it speaks to how I value what I have lost. It's an honor. when I am sad, it speaks to the value that I've placed on something that I have lost. People who can feel sadness are those who also value what they have, because they start to understand how quickly things can be taken from them. I think about it being an honoring feeling. Oftentimes when I look at pictures, when I look at a picture of Savannah and I on the day that we were married, man, an immense amount of joy comes with looking at that picture and thinking about what a great life we have and what thing we established on that day and how much joy we have. There is also a feeling of sadness when I look at those kinds of pictures. There's a feeling of sadness of, in one sense, there's a feeling of sadness of, I kind of miss when it was just me and Savannah. Don't get me wrong. You know how much I love my kids. But I do, part of me mourns that part of our relationship. And that also makes me, because I'm sad about that not being present anymore, that makes me really value the moments when my wife and I are on our own. Maybe my parents have the kids for the weekend, her parents have the kids for the weekend. It makes me value the time that we have together because it's a reminder of what we were before. It also makes me value and look forward to the day when we are empty nesters. And there will be a new appreciation of that. When I see pictures of maybe Wyatt when he was a little bitty baby, there's an immense amount of joy that comes with that. But there's also a feeling of loss because he's not a little bitty baby anymore. He's a really rambunctious toddler. And he doesn't act like a baby anymore. So I feel a sense of loss when it comes to that. When I see pictures of my grandparents who have passed on from this world, and I feel joy because there is this nice remembrance of my grandparents and the way that they loved and the way that maybe they took care of their families. There's that, but there's also the feeling of loss of not being able to connect with them in that way anymore. But then also that sadness hopefully helps promote in me, well, what kind of grandparent will I be? Will I value the relationships that I have with my grandparents that are still living? Does my sadness and my grief motivate me to value those relationships in other ways? So sadness is an honoring feeling. When we feel it, it is because we honor the relationships that have been, and hopefully it helps us to appreciate and bring about enrichment in the relationships that we currently have. And I don't know if you've picked up on, there's kind of a theme with all of these emotions that we go through. All of these emotions are meant to motivate us and to appreciate other aspects of our life. That's the heart speaking, calling out to us. And when our heart speaks to us and calls out for us in sadness, part of that is about appreciating and honoring the things that still are before they are lost. Sadness is dose specific. How much sadness you feel is proportional to how much you value what you lost. This is common sense. I'm going to feel more sad. And I know some of you think I'm crazy about this. But our dog died a few months ago. And believe it or not, we went through grief and mourning over the loss of this pet that we had for 7 years. And some of you think that's the craziest thing in the world, and some of you really understand. But we shed tears and were sad about the dog that we lost. I lose my AirPods all the time. AirPods, for those that don't know, those are little things that go... Do I have it in my pocket? Little things that go in your ear. So you can hear music. These are AirPods, and I lose them all the time. Most of the time, they're in my pants in the washing machine. That's most of the time where they're at. But I lose these all the time, and when I lose these, believe it or not, in a sense, there is a sadness because I use these all the time. Every day, I use these for different reasons. I use these all the time, every day. And when I lose them, there is a sense of sadness, but it's nowhere near the sense of sadness or grief that happens when we lost our dog or when we've lost a loved one or when a meaningful relationship has severed. Sadness is dose specific. So it's proportional to how much you value what you lost. And this is a big point before we get into our Bible passage to close us out. Sadness is a cleansing feeling. Cleansing feeling. Sadness cleanses. It's the first step to healing from loss. And I would say especially, as we'll get to in a moment, sadness with tears. Sadness with tears. I don't cry much. I cried when our dog died. And I've cried at loss of other times. I've become a lot more emotional since I became a parent. But we need more tears. All of us need more tears in our lives. We'll kind of use tears as an outward expression of the feeling that we're sort of chasing here, of tears being a cleansing feeling. And I'll say tears, but I guess I would say visible emotion maybe. I know a lot of you don't cry, but a lot of you, when you experience loss, there should be some sort of visible emotion that happens when you experience loss that other people can notice and that you can notice. And that's needed because those visible ways, especially when they're visible to you, helps you process what it is that you're feeling and navigate the feelings that you have. So sadness is a cleansing feeling. Do you remember when we talked about relationships and how the establishment of relationships and many relationships that are maintained, there is the release of oxytocin? Do you want to guess what is released when you cry? Oxytocin. When you cry, oxytocin is released, and it's a way of coping. If you almost view oxytocin as a drug, and you have been on the drug of oxytocin because of a relationship with this person, and that relationship is severed, you have a dependency on that oxytocin from that person. The tears that you shed for that person, over that person, because of the loss, is a way of almost weaning you through that loss of your dependency on the oxytocin that you receive from that person. So it's interesting that tears, oxytocin is released when you cry. So it helps in a physiological way, having to do with your body and biology. It helps chemically because of this release. Crying, showing visible emotion, also helps tremendously relationally. Why is that? Why is it that you being visibly emotional would help in your relationships? Yeah, shows that you have empathy and care. That's great. And it provides opportunity for other people to have empathy and care toward you. So it shows that you had empathy and care for the one who is maybe lost, or this relationship that's been severed. But it also provides the opportunity for other people to see you in pain and to provide help for you. Why else maybe does crying or showing tears help relationally? Especially when you cry with other people who are crying, it shows, hey, we're in this together. We're in this together. We are going through this together. Any other reasons you can think of? Yeah, that's exactly right. Many times we can't form the words for what it is that we are going through. We just know the emotion that we are feeling, and we cry, and it lets other people know that we need help, that we're going through something, and can support us. Ultimately, what I wrote down to go with this is tears draw people in and connect us with others. And if, when I have one of my babies are crying, I'm going to rush to them and pick them up and want to take care of them. And, when I am speaking with someone about maybe something difficult and they start shedding tears, I don't run up and pick them up. But I don't know about you, and I know I have more opportunities for this because of my line of profession. But seeing people, going through something and crying, that's something pretty common for me. And no matter how many times you see it, the instinct is to rush to and throw your arm around. And it's because tears draw people in. And when I choose, and sometimes you can help it and sometimes you can't. But when you cry around someone, there is a vulnerability that is exposed. And sometimes, not only is there vulnerability shown, but there is a trust that is shown of, I might not do this in front of a lot of people, but I'm willing to cry and show this weakness in front of you. And that's going to strengthen the relationship. All right, really quickly. Oh, man, I got so much to go through. All right, let's go. I know. See what we can skip. Dr. Dodd says this in his book: because sadness is a cleansing feeling, it eases the burden of daily life. Tears are gifts that we give to whatever we lose. I under that like 10 times in the book. Tears are gifts that we give to whatever we lose. We honor people with our tears. But the sentence before that, I just threw that in there. That's where it is in the book. But the part I really wanted to discuss, we're not going to discuss much, is sadness eases the burden of daily life. Helps us process things. When we put a voice to our sadness, we can begin the grief process, which leads to healing from the loss. When we grieve, eventually, we come to accept life on life's terms. Grief helps us to accept life on life's terms. And what are life's terms? The terms of life on earth is, the first one is universal. Life is tragic. And for those that do not know God, do not have a faith, life is tragic is all that they know as they go through life. There's no hope. All they know is, man, the more I go through life, the more pain and the more sorrow that there is as I go through this life. And what a beautiful and wonderful thing that it is that as people who are connected to God through Jesus Christ, that is not all that we know. We know that, yes, life is tragic and at times brutal, but God is faithful. And God is a comfort despite the tragedy that is in this life. We're going to skip what Bible stories contain sadness. There's a lot that we could have discussed. We'll go to maybe the most famous one, John chapter 11. We're going to get to the part where it says Jesus wept. John chapter 11. This is the story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. We're going to skip around a little bit in it. We're not going to read the whole story. We're not even going to get to Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. We're really just getting to Jesus wept. John chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sister sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. And then in verse 5, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So the first thing I just want us to really note about this story that we're familiar with is the love that Jesus had for Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And, of course, Jesus loves everybody. And Jesus loves you, and he has a relationship with you. Don't discount that. But there was something about his relationship with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He did love these people in a maybe more human way than maybe what we always encounter with Jesus. So Jesus had this special bond relationship with Mary and Martha and Lazarus, as is shown in this passage. Skip to Lazarus has died. They've told Jesus about this. Jesus has come to Bethany. Martha has already ran out and met Jesus in the street and said some things to him. And now we're getting to the part of Scripture where Mary comes. This is John 11, 32 through 36. Jesus has called for Mary. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, remember Lazarus is dead, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." And then famously, verse 35, two words verse here, shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." Just real quick, something to note. The Greek word here in verse 33, when Jesus saw her weeping, and then in verse 35, Jesus wept. Two different versions of weeping and wept. The Greek word for weeping that Mary and the Jews were doing was very much audible and wailing. The Greek word for Jesus wept was a weeping that involved tears, but it was more of a silent weeping. But Jesus, visible emotion here when it says Jesus wept. It's a powerful passage, one of the more powerful passages because it does show us something about Jesus. And an often debated question is, why did Jesus cry? Why did Jesus cry? When you read this passage about Jesus weeping, and I'm not going to give you the definitive answer because I don't want to. No, it's because I don't know the definitive answer of why Jesus cried. But when you read this passage, what strikes you? Why is it that Jesus cried? No right or wrong answer.
We see the human side of Jesus. That's what important to me.
Yes, that is undebatable, right? When Jesus weeps, it shows his human nature. He is God, but he is human. He has human relationships, and he is crying because of those human relationships. Why else maybe will we say Jesus cried? Shows feelings. Great. Yeah, it shows in that human nature, he has feelings. And he is not afraid to express those feelings or show those feelings. Or maybe this is even a moment where he couldn't help but express or show those feelings. I don't know. But that's great. He has feelings. Sorry. Yeah. All right. Mary and Martha, people that he deeply loved, he saw them weeping, wailing because of their grief. And maybe his weeping had to do with them just as much as it did Lazarus or that relationship, but maybe it had to do with the sisters. Honestly, when I'm reading the passage, that's where my mind goes, is Jesus is weeping because of Mary and Martha and what it is that they're going through, and he knows what they're going through. Let me quickly say a couple things here. Regardless of what it is, we could say Jesus was sad. And it was around grieving of sister and friends, about death, sad about the inevitable loss that comes with relationships. And ultimately, it just points to the truth that if someone or something matters, the loss matters. The more it matters, the greater the loss. Quickly, what do we learn from Jesus crying? Jesus wept, and I got this from the Enduring Word commentary. Jesus wept shows that Jesus was truly a man. There may be no sin or shame in tears. It shows that Jesus was acquainted with grief. Jesus was not ashamed of his humanity. Jesus identified with others in their sorrow, and Jesus loves people. This isn't the only time Jesus wept. When Jesus weeks the week before he dies, as he is going into Jerusalem, he looks on the city of Jerusalem, and it says that he weeps because of what Jerusalem has become. So that's not a severing of a relationship, but that's the reality of the situation that brought about sadness in Jesus. But Jesus models for us that it is okay. It is okay not to be, quote unquote, strong all the time. It is okay and appropriate to weep with those who weep. It is okay and appropriate to show your emotions in a way and to walk through grief for yourself and for people. Jesus was sad, and he didn't refuse it. He showed his sadness to all those who were around him. Sadness speaks of how deeply we value what we love, what we have, and what we live. We are made to use our God-given ability to attach to life and have sadness when life goes the way we don't want it to go, be it death, dreams, memories, or getting older. We are not isolated from sadness or immune to it. The question for all of us becomes, how do we live with loss? How do we grieve? And the answer, we live in loss by embracing it, feeling it, and telling the truth about it, which ultimately leads to acceptance. And acceptance is being okay with what in this life will never be okay. Thank you for being here tonight for our series, The Voice of the Heart, A Call to Full Living. Next week we are looking at anger. Looking at anger, and it's a great chapter, so very much looking forward to our discussion on anger next week. Hey, real quick before you leave, Saturday we are having a men's event here at the church building, tailgating, where we're going to watch a football game. We'll grill out. If you have a lawn chair, men, bring a lawn chair. This starts at 10:30. We'll go through the end of the Alabama game, so make plans to be here for that. We'll have a great and wonderful time. Thank you for being here tonight.